A federal judge has just handed Anthropic a pretty significant win in a high stakes copyright case that could have some implications for the future of AI. So, the court ruled that Anthropic's use of copyrighted books to train its language model Claude qualifies as, quote, fair use. We'll talk more about fair use in a second here. Judge William Alsup called it, quote, quintessentially transformative, likening Claude to a writer learning from other authors, not copying them, but using their work to create something new. This is a key distinction we'll talk about here in a second, because this is a pretty big deal for AI companies. They argue that their systems depend on vast training data to generate their outputs, and that they have a right to use certain types of data online as part of fair use. So this is the first court to explicitly endorse the fair use defense for what AI companies have been doing and what many of them have been sued for. This win for Anthropic is just a isolated win for them. It's not a broader commentary necessarily on fair use doctrine. And it's not totally complete either, because the judge also found Anthropic did go too far by downloading over 7 million pirated books from shadow libraries online. He said that was copyright infringement, and a trial in December will decide how much Anthropic owes for doing that. Now, Paul, again, with kind of the caveats here that this is not a blanket ruling, it's likely going to be appealed. It still seems like this is a pretty big deal. It sounds like at least one federal judge thinks it's okay for AI companies to train models on copyrighted material, like they've been saying they've been allowed to do.
Yeah, so anytime we talk about this stuff, we always caveat we're not attorneys. Talk to your IP attorneys. If this stuff affects you in any way, if you want to dig deeper onto this, follow some experts online who are, experts in IP law. What we're going to try and do is break down what exactly it is. So when I saw this, my first questions is almost the same every time. It's like, okay, so what is fair use? A reminder there. What is a transformative use? The facts of the case. What did we learn? What didn't we learn? What does it mean from a legal perspective? What does it mean moving forward? And the creator IP rights holder, like what is the perspective for them versus, thinking about it from the lab perspective. So I'll do my best to just break this down for a few minutes here to try and put this in context of how significant this ruling is. So fair use, according to the U.S. Copyright Office, is a legal doctrine that promotes freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright protected works in certain circumstances. Section 107 of the Copyright Act provides the statutory framework for determining whether something is fair use and identifies certain types of uses such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research as examples of activities that may qualify as fair use. Search engines is another one that comes up, and we'll get into that in a second. Section 107 calls for consideration of the following 4 factors in evaluating a question of fair use. So again, this is coming right from the U.S. Copyright Office. The first factor that's evaluated, so again, this is a case-by-case basis, is how this has to be determined. So in this case, Anthropic is sued over, using the copyright material to train their model. And what the judge has to look at is, where across these 4 factors does this fall, and is it fair use or not? So the first is purpose and character of the use, including whether the use is of a commercial nature or is for nonprofit educational purposes. Courts look at how the party claiming fair use is using the copyright work and are more likely to find that nonprofit, educational, and non-commercial uses are fair. So in this case, that is not the case. Like it is obviously a for-profit thing that they're doing. So it doesn't fall into that, educational, non-commercial use. It actually is for commercial purposes. The second factor is the nature of the copyrighted work. This factor analyzes the degree to which the work that was used relates to copyright's purpose of encouraging creative expression. The third is the amount and sustainability or substantiality. That's a word you don't see in a sentence every day. Amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole. In other words, how much of the original work was used in the output. Under this factor, the court looks at both the quantity and quality of the copyrighted material that was used. If the use includes a large portion of copyrighted work, fair use is less likely to be found. If the use employs only a small amount of copyrighted material, fair use is more likely. So, again, go back to search engines. If they're only outputting a snippet of a copyrighted material, that's going to get the fair use protection. And then the final one is effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. Here, courts review whether and to what extent the unlicensed use harms the existing or future market for the copyright owner's original work. So, if your book is used to train this model, what is the likelihood this thing's going to output your entire book versus some transformative purpose? So, courts evaluate fair use claims on a case by case basis, and the outcome of any given case depends on fact specific inquiry. This means there is no formula to ensure that a predetermined percentage or amount of work or specific number of words, lines, pages, copies may be used without permission. So, like when I was going through journalism school, I forget the exact number. And I don't even remember if this was like an AP thing or not. But I think it was like, and even in writing our books, I think it was like 100 or 125 words was kind of the guide. So if you were going to cite a work, if you were copying and pasting or like, quoting more than like 100 words from that source, then you had to, you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You had to find another way to do it. So just to give people some context, when you're writing articles or publishing or even doing social media posts, you're not supposed to put like 500 words from a source into your material. That would likely be infringing on the copyright, as an example. So the second piece here is, what does transformative mean? In the realm of copyright law, the term transformative is central and often decisive concept within the doctrine of fair use. The use is considered transformative if it does not merely reproduce the original copyrighted work, but instead adds a new dimension, purpose, or character, altering the original with new expression, meaning, or message. Essentially, the more a new work transforms, quote unquote, the original, the more likely it is to be considered fair use. So, Mike, what did they say? What was the word the judge used?
Quintessentially. So yeah, like
Transformative. Yeah.
transformative, right?
So the
So
judge is saying it's dramatically different
yeah.
by training on it. Yeah. Okay. So what did we learn? Like, what does this court case tell us? Um, as Mike kind of highlighted, training AI on legally acquired works is fair use. So in Anthropic's case, they bought a bunch of books, scanned them, and then trained on them. And the judge is saying that was okay. Like, you went through a process, you acquired the books, you transformed the use, so you're good. Digitizing purchased books for training is fair use. Using pirated materials is not fair use. Now, this is fundamental. If
Mm,
you've been listening to the show for a long time, we've talked about books three. What I think, the number, if I'm not mistaken, was 180 million pirated books exist within this books three database.
yeah.
And we know for a fact that Meta and others trained on books three. So when you think about the impact on other rulings that are already, or other court cases that are out there, they are not going to be able to, at least until this is appealed and potentially overturned. This will be used in those court cases to say, hey, this judge already said, this court already ruled that you cannot use these pirated books. And if I'm not mistaken, Mike, the um, the ruling that's expected here, the potential penalty is $150,000 per
Mhm.
incident of copyright infringement. And so if you did that 7 million times, like is
Yeah.
being assumed under Anthropic's case, that puts you out of business. So we're not saying that's what's going to happen. We're just saying, like, this is what the court now will look at, is what is the actual cost per infringement when they know that they used pirated books to do some of this. What we did not learn, let's move into that case, the legality of the AI outputs. So the decision focused on the input side, the training data side. It did not address the legality of the outputs. The question of whether AI generated content that resembles or reproduces parts of copyrighted works constitute infringement remains open, and fair use of pirated works for training. While the court ruled against the use of pirated materials to build a central library, it did not definitively rule out the possibility that using pirated works solely for the purpose of training could, in some circumstances, be considered fair use. Meaning, this is just a ruling. Like, this is now kind of going to be integrated into other cases, but this is not some definitive, it's not the Supreme Court saying this is the case and now everybody has to change the way they do things.
Right.
So, what it means from a legal perspective, this ruling sets an important, though not nationally binding precedent. It introduces a more detailed legal framework for analyzing AI and copyright, distinguishing between the active training and the sourcing of the data. What does it mean moving forward? It will now, this court case will now proceed to trial focused on the damages resulting from the use of pirated books, as we talked about. And from the creator IP rights holder perspective, creators and intellectual property right holders, the ruling's kind of a mixed bag, Mike, as you said. On one hand, it does offer a little bit more protection, but it doesn't really stop the fact that they could just go buy your book and train on it.
Hmm.
So the thing, Mike, that came to mind for me is I remember this Google Books project. So I have not actively used Google Books, the website, but I recalled that Google had an initiative to scan all books. Like I think the goal was originally 130 million,
Yeah.
and that starting back in the early 2000s, and then they actually got sued by the Authors Guild and major publishers due to massive infringement on copyrights, and they eventually won that court case in 2015. The Second Circuit affirmed the Authors Guild versus Google, where they said it was okay that they were scanning these as long as they were only providing snippets online.
Hmm.
And so if you go to books.google.com right now, like I went there and looked up our book, Mike, this morning, and it has 62 pages of our book
Right.
available to read. And then you kind of hit a limit. So the reason I bring this up is because Google has a database of at least 40 million. Now, it's probably way more. It was 40 million back in 2019. Now they've slowed down the program to my understanding. I don't know this is even actively happening, but they were basically doing deals with publishers and libraries to digitize all these books. And so then the question becomes, if they are legally allowed to train on books,
Hmm.
no one has a larger database than Google of
Yeah.
digitized books. And the value of books is when you go to train rather than scraping the internet and all the crap that comes with it. Books are high quality. They are unmatched in terms of like expertise in different fields, diversity of knowledge. So books will likely get heavier weighting when going into training sets because they generally are higher quality than what you're going to find just randomly across the internet. So that then leads back to like, wow, like maybe Google has a pretty distinct advantage here
Right.
because of their books project from 23 years ago. So I don't know. Like I just, again, like kind of thinking out loud here of things that might come out of this finding.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think there's also some other commentary from Ed Newton Rex, who we've talked about quite a bit. He posted pretty extensively about this. I was kind of going through his comments and things, but pretty interesting. He did say at one point in a post that if the Anthropic fair use verdict, one, survives appeal, and two, becomes precedent for other lawsuits, those are both big ifs, obviously, and AI training is broadly deemed to be fair use as tech lobbyists hope, paywalls will go up everywhere, which is also something I didn't consider as a possible, second or third order effect of this. It's like everyone will start avoiding AI from training on their material, though I don't know how sustainable a strategy that is in the age we're about to enter.
Yeah, and then also like if if the paywall is the only thing preventing it, I mean, as a lab, I would imagine you're probably willing to pay $300 a year to get access to
Right.
the information's
Right.
articles
Right.
because they
Yeah.
got great stuff.
So-
And so you just basically curate and say, okay, here's the 300 sources we're willing to pay annual subscriptions for. And like somebody goes and does it. And you just,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if it's legal to train on the material, like you just go pay the fees. You don't even have to do licensing deals then. You just,
Yeah.
I think
It's a
I'm
good
again, I'm
point.
kind of thinking out loud here, but if that's the case, if they can walk out and buy any book at any bookstore or take it out of the library, digitize the thing, and then it's legal to put it into the training data, why couldn't you just do the same thing with all content on the internet,
Yeah.
especially with stuff behind paywalls, and you don't have to do licensing deals?
Because I believe that's exactly what Anthropic pivoted to after a while, is they just started going and buying huge amounts of
Yeah, like
books.
yeah, millions of
Meta
dollars.
did, I believe, as well.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a really interesting point. They might just go through the paywalls.
Mhm.
It'll be a very interesting times ahead to follow this one. I'm sure we'll have some follow-up
Yeah, I expect
items
like
on
monthly, if
this.
not weekly,
Yeah,
there's going to be new
update.
stuff popping here.